Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Shigeko. How are you today?
Thank you so much. I'm good. And I'm so excited to be here.
Well, thank you for being a part of the Life Shift podcast. I tell everyone this, so regular listeners, you can ignore this part, but I never expected to be on a journey like this and be able to talk to people across the world about their personal pivotal moments. And what I found is by hearing all of these different stories, I found that I've been healing parts of me that I didn't think I needed to heal anymore. Like I thought I was good. And now by connecting with so many other people, I've just realized the power of story and how much it can bring us together and help us like kind of reflect on things. So before we even talk about your story, thank you for just wanting to be a part of my healing journey by telling your story. For anyone that's tuning in for the first time to listen to you, the Life Shift podcast really comes from my own personal experience. When I was 8, my parents were divorced, lived states apart, and I was visiting my father for the summer. And one day after summer camp, my dad brought me into his office and he had to tell me that my mom had been killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment in time, everything that I knew about my everyday life was now no longer possible because I lived with my mom full time. I lived in Massachusetts and had my family there, and I had my friends and my school and all the things. And suddenly I was going to have to live with the parent I didn't always live with in a new state, in a new school, new friends, no family. And this was late 80s, early 90s. And so people weren't really talking about grief. They weren't talking about helping kids with their mental health or any of those things. And I suppressed everything for a long time. I realized the adults around me needed to see that I was going to be okay. So I kind of just showed them that I was going to be okay. And that just snowballs into a 20-year messy grief journey. But I say all that because behind the scenes, of course, I was a mess. But also, I was wondering, do other people have these line in the sand pivotal moments in which from one moment to the next, either everything about them, their lives was different or everything about themselves was different. And now yes, we have lots of them. And I'm realizing that now, but I get to talk to people about these really pivotal moments so that people listening out there that might be in a circumstance where they feel really alone might hear one of our stories and go, oh, I'm not the only one going through this. Maybe there is hope, or I'm inspired to do something different. So it has been quite a journey. And I think my mom would be proud of how I've used a messy journey to get to this point to be able to talk through this. So it's been great. And I'm so glad that you're part of this.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful that you're doing this.
And I'm sure you know, because you're a writer, power of story. Do you feel, and this is something that I've realized by watching people tell their story for the first time, is I know there's like power in reading stories, there's power in hearing other people's stories. What I didn't really realize was the power of telling your own story. Have you found a different power by writing about your story and telling your story more through your life?
Yes, well, it was like, I didn't really start writing, and creative writing until like 2007 or 8. But that's when I participated in a writing retreat. And it was kind of scary experience because I didn't know what to expect. But it's called free fall writing, and it's supposed to help you write from the higher self. And until then, I think my son was like 10, but I just felt like nothing because the motherhood has been so challenging for me. And then I just felt like I lost my confidence and everything. And it was a week long, but on the third day, I started to write my childhood memories. And when the instructor shared that story with other people, it was about a group of 8, people started to kind of sob or cry. And then that's when I realized, well, I felt heard and seen and kind of validated for what I shared. And that was such a huge moment of like a breakthrough. And that's when I discovered the healing power of storytelling.
It's it that's I mean, that's beautiful. It's so scary the first time you like share something
Oh, it was,
vulnerable,
yeah,
but then you're like, people are like, they're not judging me. They're validating. They're they're listening. Like you said, feeling heard. Like I actually have goosebumps right now because I think it's just so important. And I think so many of us have grown up with this idea that there's only certain things we can talk about. There's only, the permitted things to talk about. And now I'm like, let's throw that out the window because the only way we're going to get more connected with each other is to be open and honest. And even
and
if
vulnerable.
Right. And
Yeah,
even if my story does not resonate with you and you don't agree with the things that I've done, at least you can respect the fact that I did that and I'm a human. And like, we don't have to agree on everything, which I think for so long I was like, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Like I had to follow all the rules. And now I'm like, let's just be
exactly.
people. So I love that. Well, congratulations for that breakthrough because I'm sure it puts you on a whole new journey. But we'll get into your story in just a second. But maybe for 2025, you can tell us who you are. 2025, how do you show up in the world? How do you identify? What's your vibe?
Okay, so in 2025, after taking about 10 years to complete and refine my manuscript, my book is going to be published on October 7th, finally.
Congratulations.
It's been a very, very long journey, but I grew so much through this process and also understand myself better. I developed so much more self-compassion in something I didn't have before. It's surreal that I'm going to be like soon to be a published author.
Congratulations.
No, thank you. But I'm hoping this is going to be my launchpad to engage with communities. It's a healing message, basically. I mean, share such a personal struggles throughout my life. But when I was able to start to heal, I realized that can help other people as well. And I want my book to be of service to other people. And I never really thought of, I mean, I'm sort of like accidental writer and accidental author, but I felt compelled to share my story because there's something that seems so important, in terms of generational trauma and how not to pass it on to your son and for the future generation. So there are a lot of pieces to this story.
So you show up as an author these days, a published
I
author, because
guess,
by
yeah.
the time this episode comes out, your book will have been out for a few weeks and congratulations, it's out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I
And it's out of
appreciate
you,
that.
which is a whole other thing. I imagine, getting that story out. I always tell people, or I talk to people about things in my head, and the stories that I tell myself in my head are often much scarier than when I put them down and I can like see them on paper and process them and kind of reflect on like,
Yeah,
oh, I made those decisions because of this, instead of like all this self blame and the things
totally.
that happen. So
Yeah.
I
You
bet
can
there's,
help crystallize your ideas by putting it down, and you kind of develop this kind of objective perspective on things. So it kind of help activate more like, I don't know, higher functioning part of the brain that help make sense of chaotic experiences.
well, let's get into your story. Maybe you can, however far back you want to go, paint the picture of your life leading up to kind of that main pivotal moment that we're going to talk about today, fully understanding that you have many of them, like we all do.
Yeah, I have several, but one thing that stands out is from my teenage years. I grew up in Japan in a affluent but emotionally very detached and disconnected family. And I have two older brothers, so we had a family of five, but it didn't feel like a family. It was like five separate individuals just happened to be sharing the same house, and I didn't really see any of them much. My father was a surgeon who founded a hospital. He was very affectionate and loving, and I knew he loved me, but he was a workaholic. So I hardly ever saw him when I grew up. I'm the youngest of the three. And so by the time I was born, my mother was about 30, and she just didn't want to stay at home anymore. So she was out, partying or bowling, drinking, whatever. I mean, there was always somebody there, but I had this revolving cast of caregivers. A lot of them worked for my father's hospital. So my parents had this like a free, childcare. but and they're very loving people, and I knew they really cared about me, but almost like they were working in shifts. So it was very unstable environment I was in, and so I always had this like a fear of abandonment or something like that. So even though it looked perfect from outside, wealthy family,
It was empty inside.
yeah, I was sad and lonely, and but I didn't know how to describe it. I was very quiet, kind of obedient child, right? So I kind of stay quiet, and then on top of that, starting from first grade, I had to attend a brutally competitive private elementary school in Tokyo by commuting about 1.5 in a rush hour train every single day.
In first grade?
First grade, yeah. I mean, it's common in Japan. But I was terrified every morning because I was small. And then all this, we were packed like sardines. And so for me, this like a fight or flight was like almost like constant reaction.
Part of me is thinking of this young child and seeing other families. Did you see other families that were different than yours so you were able to compare and contrast or feel a certain way?
Yeah, occasionally,
Okay.
but because the school was so far away, my classmates would live far away, so I didn't have too many friends once I got home. And when I occasionally went to visit and stay with them, I knew they were different, but I didn't know I didn't really think about it. I basically normalized my family environment because that was something that I
It's all
got
you knew.
accustomed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so I spent first say 12 years in a survival mode, and I think it must have done something to my nervous system because it was very hard for me to relax, always on edge kind of thing.
Was there situations in which if you're in this fight or flight mode, was there a fear of doing something wrong? So like would you get in trouble or punished in any way, or was it more a fear like if you did something wrong, more people would leave or rotate out of your life,
Um
or neither?
oh, yeah, I wasn't really thinking in terms of that, but like because school was main things, and Japanese is a conformity society, right? So there's a tremendous group pressure, and for me it's just to try to be invisible. Try not to stand out, because if you do, you get bullied or something. They expect you to be just don't make any trouble.
Yeah.
And
No
so
waves. Just be there,
yeah,
float
just kind
around.
of keep it in, yeah, everything. So I don't think I even express anything to my teachers or anything like that.
Yeah, I only asked that because for me, two things stand out. The first question I asked you about seeing other families, for me, it was like when I would go to another family and see a mom, it, that would be like, oh, that's what family is supposed to feel like. And then the other thing was I became a perfectionist because I was afraid if I didn't do things right, my dad was also going to leave. Because, when you're a kid, when someone dies, if it's like abandonment in a way. So that's
Totally.
where those questions
Yeah.
come from. Just curious, trying to relate in
Yeah.
that way.
I'm actually about to get to that point. Yeah. Actually, so I was not a good student. If you're in a survival mode, it really affects your memory and something. So I think, I was not a bottom student, but I was always had this sense of not good enough, right? And that kind of still stuck with me to today. So when I started middle school, we all have to take English as a compulsory subject, and I was terrified. Anything new, I had fear of failure and fear of learning. I may even have the learning disability too. That maybe the survival mode might have affected me. But I don't know. So I was one of the worst students in English, and even I have to stay after school for supplemental, lessons. So I started attending a language school, and when I was 16, the language school put together a homestay program that seven of us went to stay with American family in Napa, California. And that's when things started to change because I was so fortunate to be with such a loving, nurturing, caring family. And I had the happiest summer, to that point. I got so attached to them. Now I see a huge contrast, between my family and the American family. And I didn't want to go back to Japan, but I had to. So, so after I went back to Japan, that's when things like a tumultuous period started because it was hard for me to reconcile that such stark differences between the families and see how family can be so loving because my family was so distant and cold. And so over time it led me to a kind of existential crisis. And I think it was triggered because I became much more argumentative, combative, and very different from how I used to be. And then my mother said, like, sending you to America was the biggest mistake we've ever made. You were not like this before. And so I thought, how could she say that the happiest summer, happiest time in my life is the worst mistake?
Yeah.
So I just exploded, and then I became a combative. And then that kind of led me to like some kind of existential crisis, and that led me to a profound soul searching. And I just wanted to find the answer to sustain, just kind of what is the meaning of life? Why am I suffering like this? And so since there's no therapist or friends were far away, I turned to books. So I read a lot of philosophy books, religious books like Bible, Zen Buddhism, and I got so engrossed in the process. I think I was doing that for about a week without much sleep and not eating much. And towards the end, anybody who is sleep deprived can have this kind of hallucination, right? And I really like listening to Far East Network. It's a radio station for military people. And one of my favorite programs was Uthman Jack. I don't know if you know, but Uthman Jack is a kind of, he has a gravelly voice, but really fun to listen to. And then suddenly I thought like he was talking to me. And that was a red flag. And not, and then one time my brother came in, he's also a doctor, came with a syringe into my room. And then he said, "Oh, you need to relax, you need to sleep, this will help you relax." So I said, "No, I don't want that." But he gave me the shot anyway, and it turned out to be a tranquilizer shot. And so several days later, I woke up in a strange mental hospital room that I had no idea how I got there and where I was, anything. So it was a very disorienting experience. And I'm not going to go into details because it's in my book. But anyway, I think back in the 1979, Japan is still lags behind America in terms of psychiatry or whatever, and they had very few boxes, seems like, and then they have to give me some kind of diagnosis to treat me. And because I had this symptoms of schizophrenia by hallucinating or something or erratic behavior, they just decided to treat me as if I were schizophrenia patient. So I was bombarded with like lots of antipsychotic, powerful medication,
Gosh.
and that totally knocked me out. And it took me a while to really get back to normal. And I think they didn't really they gave medication, but they did not have a talk therapy to really understand what I had. And even, nobody told me exactly what my diagnosis was. And um,
They were just giving you drugs to.
yeah, and then doctors were basically telling me that no wonder you developed whatever you developed because of the family dysfunction. And it was shrouded in mystery. But after I was discharged and looked like I was back to normal, nobody wanted to talk about it. It was like a dirty laundry that they just wanted to be swept under the rug. And when I asked my mother what I was hospitalized for, and she said, "Oh, you got the illness of spoiled, ungrateful, entitled children." And so that was kind of opposite of what I was hearing from the other doctors. And then I just no use discussing this. So I stopped asking. I really wanted to leave the family because it was not healthy environment. And also Japanese society is so constrictive for me. Especially, I don't think it really has changed that much since then. That mental health issues are so heavily stigmatized, and there's a culture of shame. So people suffer in silence, and they don't seek help because they don't want to perceive from other people like you're a crazy person. Yeah, so that was sort of like my pivotal moment. And without that experience, I probably wouldn't be living in America now or written a book.
Right. It's such a one thing kind of led to the next, where, I mean, they, you probably went to the place that they put you in because they didn't want to handle it more so than,
Yeah, they
you
didn't know
know,
how. I mean, they had
right.
no idea what was going on, right?
Right. But like you were describing, you were trying to find yourself because you had this
Mm-hmm.
experience in America where you're like, oh, life doesn't have to feel like it has for the last 16 years. There is something,
Right.
and like, how do I get there? And I can imagine you're now being forced back into the box that you didn't want to live in the first place. And so now you're just seeking for like who you are and what you can do and how you can get out. And then your family thinks you need to go get some help. Do you think you needed help, or do you think you just needed rest, or you think you just needed do you think you needed to be in that space when you got out?
I think it. I think it would have helped if there's some therapist who can be a like a sounding board, and also some help with sleep because I was so hyper and manic kind of thing. And the sleep is always an issue.
Right. When you go too long without it, then it's even harder to get it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So
It becomes a
that
nasty
would have
cycle.
been hugely help instead of going to the hospital and be medicated.
Right. Yeah. Because, I mean, the medication in a lot of cases, probably, especially then, the way you describe it was just trying to like give you something to like get you back to quote unquote normal. And you're like, I don't want to be normal. I want to be me.
Yeah, yeah. They just knock you out. That was the way they dealt with it,
Yeah.
and then gradually come back up. But because medication was so powerful, it took a long time to just wait. Weigh myself from it. They don't because they don't want me to abruptly stop it.
Right. That's
So
dangerous.
that was a gradual process.
So when you got home from that, your mom was less than kind, and but I guess that was par for the course for you, but you were just like, I gotta I can't live here. Is that,
Yeah,
I
yeah. It
mean,
was like a family betrayal for me. Yeah,
yeah, because they didn't, it's almost like, I don't want to go as far as saying they didn't care, but I bet it felt like they didn't care, or
yeah,
they cared more about maybe how others saw them than how you felt. Is that true?
yeah, yeah. And also, my story is not really blaming anybody, really, because I know it's a generational trauma that I inherited from my parents. I mean, they had some issues, but it would manifest in their way of coping under stressful situation. And I think I just copied how they dealt with it, like emotional outburst or say something really unkind, or just not willing to listen.
It's the hard part, right? It's so I mean, I think a lot of us are most people will pull something from their parents or their grandparents or, whatever's epigenetics kind of down the line to in our blood sometimes, and it's a lot harder to push against that. And I mean, case in point, you seeing that there was something else out there, and now you went deep dive into these books and listening and reading and all this stuff. That's the hard part. Like that's pushing you out of like, I want to change, and you went so far that you needed to kind of regulate that. But I think so many of us carry a lot of that. So how'd you get out? I mean, I don't want to say like you escaped, but how did you end up coming to America?
Well, I wanted to come sooner, but because of this setbacks, I always, because the American family encouraged me to come to the States for higher education, and I've always wanted, but I have to wait till I was 22 when I felt more stable.
So
And
that was a lot of years that you had to kind of,
yeah, kind of struggle to just feel back normal because, yeah, the medication really made my brain so weird.
I can't imagine. Did you feel like yourself, or did you feel like you had to build a new
No.
version?
Well, it was just like when I tried to go back to school, nothing was came in, it's like, and so it was like, so I was, for the first time I was in hospital, about maybe it was 2 months or so. And then I tried to go back to school and then I just couldn't learn. And my vision was all messed up and all kinds of physical symptoms. And I just couldn't deal with it. So I asked doctors to see if they could just, stop medication. But they say, oh, well, we have to monitor you to do that. And for that, I was desperate that I was willing to go back so that they can reduce the medication. So after I struggled and I couldn't function, I went back willingly to the hospital to just, so yeah, so it just took a while to regain myself from that experience. Oh, and the doctors were worried about me, and my parents, well, my family was worried that while you are not stable, you should not go to the States. But I insisted on going. So I came. And then once I got here in a healthy environment, living close to the host family, I was fine and I thrived. It was like, and I stopped taking medication and I was totally fine until I became a mother. And then everything started to come back. But there's a period of time that I felt so at
Alive.
peace and stable. Yeah, very happy.
So now you're in America. You don't have the boundaries of your parents. Was there anything that you were like, man, I've always wanted to do this and now I can do it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I just could be myself. Like, in Japan, there's this like a facade, like front and back, right? So you have to be able to go between that smoothly. And I was not very good at doing that. I was always one side, inside face. No, I was never good at keeping the facade. So I didn't have to do that anymore. I could be very honest. And I just felt like I was in touch with my authentic self. And that made me feel really liberated.
I bet. Yeah, and the weight of masking for so long. I mean, it's so heavy. I bet when you got here, you're like, wow, like I could really live.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was, yeah, pretty, yeah, it was fun. I had a lot of friends. I was just kind of enjoying being who I was, and to be able to spend so much time with the American family, it was such a blessing.
And be loved
And
in
yes,
that
and I
way.
got really, very close, especially toward the mother. She became more like a spiritual mother for me, and it was anchoring me in a way.
Yeah. My grandmother was that way after I lost my mom. She was very much like the rock, the motherly figure, and played the role really well. And so I understand that feeling of like seeking and then you find it and you're like, hold on.
Yeah, yeah. No,
It's
I
beautiful.
think we all need that.
Yeah. So you're in America. doing your thing now, I guess early mid 20s, kind of for a good period of time, going to school. Like
Yeah.
what did you do? Did you start
Yeah,
living it
I
up?
mean, I started, I when for the first time in my life, I became very motivated to study. Until then, I was just not interested at all. But I became very much interested in early childhood development and education. And I think
I wonder
I,
why.
I knew, yeah, I knew from the way back that there was something that was missing and I wanted to learn. And then I just kept pursuing further study, and then I got a Montessori teaching certificate to work with young kids, and eventually I got into Stanford for in education department and to continue doing research my dissertation was about Japanese preschool education. So actually I went back to Japan
How was
to
that?
observe preschool. It was very interesting because I lived long enough in the States that I developed a different perspective. So even though I was Japanese going back, I had different perspectives. So it was an interesting experience. I had so much fun just observing and interviewing teachers. Yeah, I conducted a thing called ethnographic study. It's an anthropological method that you become part of the community. So you become a participant and also at the same time observer. In some way, like I was able to use that method to study myself and apply that while I was writing a book. It was a useful tool.
I imagine. Did you have any, like, seeing that age children and being back there? Did you have any, like, this is too similar, or it's changed so much, or did you see yourself in any of those children?
Yes, it was. Well, the thing is, my topic was how Japanese preschool teachers interpret the concept of spontaneity and initiative because it was during the education reform back in 1980s to 90s. Japan thought that they're very good at creating group cohesion and harmony, but they're not very good at promoting individuality and creativity. And for Japan to survive or continue to compete in the world market, they have to produce creative individual. So they started to implement that, and I just was curious, like, oh, it's so different from how I experienced the Japanese schooling, and so it was. I chose three main schools, and one of them was a very regimented, traditional kind of school that I went to, and then sort of a halfway between that and the other extreme was more like a very child-centered and the play focused. I mean, it was still promoted through group harmony, but each child was allowed to be him or herself or themselves, and then somewhere in between. And then I just saw such a contrast between the expression of children between this extreme two schools and the kids at the play-centered, child-centered school. Kids were just so much fun and having
I
fun
bet.
and lively, spontaneous,
Spontaneous.
spontaneous. But the other school was just like kids were just scared of what
Getting in
comes
trouble.
next. Yeah, the director was very authoritarian. Yeah, even among the teachers were
Yeah.
kind of scared too.
I would imagine that that's probably, I mean, I'm sure you could find that in pockets of the United States as well, even still, like
Mm-hmm.
the disparity between groups of or types of schools, I would imagine, because I feel like there must be. I would imagine that we have some really regimented, and then we have some be your own be your own thing and kind of run around the world. But so when you were,
Yeah.
did it make you feel better seeing them, seeing differences? Did it bring back, did it bring back some of those feelings as a kid? Like, I feel like that could be triggering in a lot of ways, and it seems like you went right into the lion's den.
Yeah. Well, I saw some hope when I
Okay.
saw this more, the school, child center school. The director was an artist, and he really valued children's creativity and expression. So at least there's a pockets of group that see the importance of that rather than just being so oppressive and being a competitive environment.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that you did that and furthered your education when that wasn't something you were super into in your younger years. So now you're giving back. Like what you're doing because of the traumatic experiences you had as a child, it seems like your work since coming to America has been giving back to the children that were to make sure kids didn't feel like you did. Would you say that's
Right.
semi true?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because it's preventable if people are aware of how important the early stages are. But I think a lot of us are just unconscious of what we are doing to young children. And this is something that was not the most pivotal moment, but just about several years ago when I was still working on my earlier drafts, I started to hear the term complex trauma or complex PTSD. And I became curious, so I started to learn more about it. And when I discovered that the origin of the disorder or condition and the symptoms perfectly matched mine, it was a huge light bulb moment because what I had struggled all my life off and on had a name. So it wasn't like it was my fault that I developed certain coping mechanism or cognitive distortions. It was a way I had to survive, and that's how I developed. So that sort of stopped my inner critic. That's another hallmark is a vicious inner critic of complex trauma. I was able to stop it in its tracks. So I started practicing more self kindness and understanding and become more like an ally than enemy.
And
And
that's in the last
kind
like
of,
less
yeah.
than 10 years?
Well, I mean, through writing, I started to discover little by little, but when I started to find out more about the complex trauma was about 5 years ago. Because complex trauma is still, I mean, even though it's been around nearly like 30 years, the term itself, and it's well established among the mental health community and professionals. I think the public still lags behind in its knowledge. So a lot of people say, "Oh, I know PTSD, but I don't know about CPTSD or complex PTSD." But for me, it was so empowering to have the language and conceptual framework to discuss what I've been struggling, and it was validating, you know.
Yeah. No, I mean it's kind of like being heard. It's kind of like being
Yes.
validated. It's and the reason I was asking how long ago it was is because when I finally kind of made it through grieving my mom, people don't like when I say made it through, but when I kind of got there and it was like a simple thing that like triggered me to kind of switch, so kind
Hmm.
of like finding CPTSD and like that wasn't the same for me, but like it was like a single sentence that the therapist told me. But what happened for me is then I actually went the wrong way first, where I started kind of shaming myself for not figuring it out sooner. Like, why didn't I figure this out when I was 20? Why didn't I figure this out when I was 15? Did you have any of those moments where you look back and you're like, I should have figured it out, or were
Yeah.
you very compassionate?
Well, no, I wish I'd known that sooner so that I could have start practicing self kindness because I was the worst enemy. Like everything that came out of this survival mechanism, like black and white, all or nothing, perfect, thinking, perfectionism, low self esteem. It just made a whole. I mean, life can be very challenging, but that mindset makes it much harder than they need to be.
So really, like figuring that out has been your latest life shift of like kind of like
Oh
leaning
yeah,
more into who you are and who you want to be.
yes, and I wanted to, because it took me a lifetime to find out what I know now. I just wanted to pass that knowledge and give it some to other people who might find it helpful for their own healing journeys. And I think that something like invisible, I mean, physical and sexual abuse are awful, but at least you can see it. It's more visible. Whereas something more emotional and internal, and if the society want you to not talk about it,
Yeah, cultural too.
it
Yeah,
just yeah, it just remains invisible, and then as a natural thing is just to beat yourself because you think that's your fault or something. So once you understand it, so for me that kind of discovery was a huge turning point in terms of my healing. I mean, the writing has been very helpful in terms of making sense of chaotic experiences and piecing together my fragmented memories. But to be able to just feel like, well, that makes sense, how I developed this nervous system. And because one thing that if I have this the neurological perspective and how those early prolonged toxic stress can change the brain and wire in certain way that makes the children hypersensitive to stress and overwhelm. And yeah, if you understand that change the nervous system, and it kind of makes sense because I was constantly in a survival mode that just does that to the brain. So
totally agree. I think it's so great. And whenever we find that space to
mhm.
be able to reflect with compassion and understanding and awareness, I think awareness is huge. So many of us live in these live lives without that self-awareness. And I think once we can find that and be honest with ourselves about those things, I think it can create something beautiful. Like, I mean, you have this book out now, and what I mean, what made you want to write it? Like, did someone be like, was someone like, you should write this book? Or did you wake up one day and be like, I need to write this in a book?
somebody said like, oh, you have an interesting life or something like that, but it started off with I always like to keep journal, like somehow the idea became clear when I put my thoughts into words.
Yep.
But it started off with like a self exploration
Okay.
because there's just so much that I didn't know, and especially around the hospitalization experience, it was basically swept under the rug, and then I didn't know what it was, but because I became healthier and things didn't come back. I mean, it did come back later, but when I was thriving, after I came to the States, I thought it was just a fluke. But when I started to have some issue, because the teenage years were so traumatizing for me, when my son started to exhibit similar kind of anxiety and depression and rebellion, I freaked out because I thought I did everything I could to avoid, to help him not go through what I went through. So I became hyper vigilant and I over projected my own experience. And now, in looking back, he had this ADHD and something that could create anxiety, like a ADHD induced anxiety or depression type of thing. It was also part of the teenage angst, right? But I could not make that distinction because I was just so worried.
Yeah.
So that kind of prompt me to like, there's just something I need to figure out more. So that's when I became really serious about turning this into a book. So, and I didn't start off with the outline because I was still exploring. And it was almost like a huge marvel that you kind of chip in a little bit, and then the form kept changing. And I don't know. I think it was also so. My book is not. it's a non-linear. It's not like straight, chronological, and it also covers the wide swath of my life because I wanted to show the lasting effects of childhood trauma and how that show up in adult life, especially motherhood and marriage. So it kind of has two storyline. One is like my present life as a wife and a mother of a teenage son, and the other one is my troubled upbringing. And so it kind of toggles between two storylines and weave them together. So what emerged was more like patchwork or mosaic of more or less cohesive narrative to make sense of my life. It was gratifying and also healing to
Yeah,
come to
I
that.
I can't imagine. I just as you saying that, like how healing that must feel, like how hard it must be, right? Like there's a lot of trauma that you have to bring back up, and there's a lot of things that you have to
Yeah, it was.
revisit.
Yeah, that's why I have to take a lot of breaks, and that's why it took a long time.
Hey,
But I,
fair. When you
yeah,
put that last puzzle piece together, I bet it felt like okay, this is like good job, you did it,
yeah, yeah,
and
and so it was
not to
very
say that you're
satisfying.
fully healed. Just we're never
No,
fully
no,
healed.
highly no, no, because yeah, it's almost like, I've been putting some social media posts, but I see it more like a never-ending spiral staircase, and each time you get triggered, it kind of bring you back to similar thing, but you go deeper and heal a little bit more each time. Or peeling a giant onion, and you peel and it just keeps, you have to keep doing that. And so I see, and especially something that starts so early on, it just leaves such a lasting, powerful imprints in your brain. And so you stick with you. And I see that healing journey to be like a lifelong. And I have to be vigilant not to slip back into the default setting because it's always there. But I think just having awareness and understanding, I have something in my toolbox to navigate challenges that come my way.
Yeah. Or if
So,
something comes up from the past and you now know how to address it and acknowledge it and move through it instead of being stuck in it. I think that's the biggest, that was the biggest trick for me is to just like acknowledge however I was feeling at whatever time. Because growing up, I felt like I could only show people that I was happy or mad because I was a boy, and I wasn't allowed to be sad. And now I get sad because I'm a full human, like I have moments. And when I do have sad days or bad days, I go, okay, you're having a bad day. It's not always going to be a bad day. You'll get out of this. Honor yourself, honor how you're feeling. And I'm sure it's probably similar when things come up for you now that you have the tools and the awareness to kind of move through
yeah,
life. It's not easy
yeah.
though.
And yeah, and I was not very good at self care, right? And
Oh, you're a
especially
mom.
when I wanted, yeah, and I just wanted to make sure my son was well taken care of. So I was so focused on him, and then I neglected myself all over again. I was neglected as a child, and then I neglected myself as a mother. So I
Because
was
you wanted
operating
to
from
show
this,
the love that you didn't get,
right,
right?
and I overcompensated,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I was not good at taking care of myself anyway. So it was like not
You're a
hard to
human.
neglect myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it went out the window. But I think when you continue to operate from a depleted cup, you will get burned out, and that's exactly what happened to me. And so you have to be in tune with your own needs and make sure you are taking care of yourself to be helpful to other people. So being, you know, service oriented and make sure everybody's taken care of was not difficult for me, but taking care of myself was a really challenge.
Got to be intentional.
Yeah, but when I started to develop this self kindness and compassion, it became so much easier to do, and I developed so much more capacity to care for other people, and because I
Funny
want
how that
to, not
works.
because I have to.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's kind of like anything. Like the more we practice it, the easier it is, the more we can expand our ability to do it. And so if we can practice the
Yeah.
self care for ourselves, it gives us more room to give more whatever to other people and bring them into our circle. Of course, if we want to, not out of
Mm-hmm.
obligation, but out of love, like heart centered and moving through life in
Mm-hmm.
that way. I love that you found this space and this compassion and self love and understanding that you're not always going to get it right, because who does, right?
Right. Yeah, it is a ongoing
Yeah, we have. I mean,
practice.
if we're lucky, it's an ongoing practice, right? Like if we find it, we keep going, and we're never going to hit that got it one and done. I'm curious
Yeah.
though,
Yeah.
if you could go back to that version of you that was riding the train to school every day so far, feeling like you had to blend in with everyone else, is there anything that like this version of you would want to tell that little girl?
Yeah. I just wanted to tell her, you're doing the best you can and you're doing great. And just, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. And yeah, I know. I just give her a lot of love and care and attention that she didn't get.
She'd probably love to see how you're thriving now, and the and that it was possible, and that you would
Yeah.
eventually find this joy and light that you have now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes I also feel like I mean, I wasn't thinking in that term when I was writing the book or whatever, but I just feel like I was doing a very important task of kind of healing the lineage that I'm sure the kind of thing that my parents had, they inherited from their parents. And then for me to kind of stop it and also not pass it on to the next generation, it was a very important work. And also, it's sort of an act of quiet rebellion or defiance against the culture that heavy stigmatized emotional struggles in Japan. And I've written this in English, but someday I want it to be translated because I don't want to go off on a tangent, but there are a lot of people in Japan who are suffering in silence,
Totally.
and one of the very clear example is hikikomori. Do you know the Sharians? About 1.5 million people, and I think it's an underestimated number, but they're just hiding away from the society, and because of the stigma and because of the culture of shame, they don't want to seek help, and so they shut down. And so sometimes I wonder, like, if I were in Japan, I wonder if I might have, joined
Yeah.
the ranks of that
Yeah. I mean, to
phenomenon.
survive, you probably would have. I think
Yeah,
it's
it was a very difficult if you don't fit in. I mean, and I didn't fit in. I always feel like a misfit. I didn't fit into my family. I didn't fit into school, society. Always felt like that.
well, I'm glad you found your home here and your people here and this
Yes.
new thriving version of you here. I think we're all better because of it. So thank you for that. If people want to like connect with you, check out your book, like what's the best way to find you, tell you their story, tell you how your story resonated with them? How do we find you?
Well, I have my author website. It's a shigekoito.com, SHIGEKOITO.com. And it tells all about my story. And there's some blogs. And there's also a picture of my childhood and all the way to close recent.
Close to
So you
now.
get to see. Yeah. And I have a book. Is it okay to show this
Yeah,
book
of
that
course.
and the poem beyond the forest, and there's a koi in the back. The fish, it's kind of symbolic for me. I start off my story with the prologue, fish dream, and it's very very short, but it's actually based on my truth, that dream that I had after I came to the States and thriving. So it is about the little child bring a goldfish in a plastic bag and I show it to my father. Where can I put it? And he said, "Oh, there's an empty tank in the basement, so you can use that." And so I go down to the basement, in the dark basement. It's all metaphorical, kind of oppressive. And then when I release it, I somehow thought that you wouldn't be happy here. And then I realized that there's a pond beyond the forest that's a much bigger pond that the fish will be happy. So I scoop it up with my bare hand and then carry it to over to the forest. But on the way, I drop the fish, and the fish gets stuck in the mud and then gasping for air. And then I momentarily panic, but I scoop it up and with resolved, I just continue the path. And when I got to the pond, I released the fish. And even though it struggles at first, it rights itself and swims away. And I was heartened to see that liberation.
That's your
So
story.
that's a symbolic. Yeah, it's a. I put that in a prologue, even though some people may not get the significance of it. But that kind of symbolizes a cyclical nature of my hero's journey. That basically find my authentic path and to revelation. So that's why the fish is everywhere in my book.
No, when you were telling it, I was like, that's your story. Like the mud is your hospital visit, and then your pond is
Uh huh.
beyond the forest is over here in the States.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And that's how I got the title too. So,
I love it. No, I love it. And thank you for just kind of coming on this journey. I'm sure when you showed up today, you didn't know what we were going to talk about. I mean, you did, you knew your own story, but you didn't know where we were going to go with it. And I appreciate you being willing to like kind of go down this road because I think it's so valuable for people to hear the stories of people through their own mouths.
yes. And the more we speak, the more we can normalize this discussion and create a compassionate society,
Exactly.
or, with a shared understanding.
So important. And we will put your website link in the show notes so people can connect with this. By the time this episode is out, your book will be out into the world. And so they will be able to order it right away. No more pre orders. They can just get that book. Highly encourage you to do that. And so thank you for just being a part of this journey.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you.
I enjoyed it as well. And I am so thankful that everyone is listening. Thank you for just showing up every single week to these important stories. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye and I will be back next week with a brand new episode.
Okay.
Thanks again.